For over 2 decades, he has been an undeniable force. He's not a hero. He's not a villain. He is a viper, a cold, unblinking gaze. He is the apex of his kind. And for those who stand in his way, there is only one certainty: fear. This is the story of the apex predator, Randy Orton. If you love wrestling and want to see more videos like this, subscribe to SlamTube Wrestling, where we explore the untold stories and legendary moments from the squared circle. Randall Keith Orton was not born into a typical family. He was born on April 1st, 1980. His father, Cowboy Bob Orton Jr., and his grandfather, Bob Orton Sr., were both acclaimed professional wrestlers. Randy Orton was, in essence, an instant legend by birthright. This familial pressure and the inherent privilege of his lineage would shape his entire career. The legend killer persona, which would later define him, was not a random construct. It was a psychological response to the very legacy that gave him his start, a character built on the paradoxical desire to reject and surpass his own history. Orton began his wrestling training in 2000 at WWE's developmental territory, Ohio Valley Wrestling, learning from veterans like Fit Finlay and his own father. His first official televised match was on SmackDown on April 25, 2002, where he defeated Hardcore Holly. After being traded to the Raw brand in September 2002, a seemingly career-derailing shoulder injury sidelined him for months. However, this setback proved to be a pivotal turning point. While recovering, he remained on television through a weekly vignette segment called the Randy News Network. These segments, where he talked about his condition and interrupted other programming. The injury, therefore, was not a curse, but a catalyst. The unintended consequence was the creation of a more complete and captivating character. Upon his return from injury, Orton's character solidified with his inclusion in the powerful Evolution stable, alongside Triple H, Ric Flair, and Batista. As the young, handsome prospect of the group, he adopted the legend killer gimmick, proclaiming himself the future of wrestling and gaining infamy for blatantly disrespecting older, respected names. The persona was a masterclass in generating genuine heel heat. By targeting fan-revered figures like Mick Foley and The Undertaker, Orton used the audience's emotional investment against them, positioning himself as a villain who was not only arrogant but personally offensive to wrestling purists. Over the next few years, Orton's character underwent a profound psychological transformation. By 2009, he had evolved from the prideful legend killer into a much more sinister figure, the Viper, or the apex predator. The change was not merely physical, marked by his bald head, but a deep shift in his motivation and demeanor. He became cold, calculating, and intense, acting as a psychopath obsessed with taking out anyone in his way with his signature punt kick. Where the legend killer's actions were born from arrogant pride, the Vipers were unfeeling and brutal. His ring psychology changed with him. His offense became more methodical, using chin locks and methodical strikes to methodically dismantle his opponents and set up the devastating RKO. He was no longer a rebellious upstart trying to prove himself. He was a cold-blooded sociopath who acted without emotion or concern for his opponents. The character went from someone who craved validation to someone who no longer cared what anyone thought. Randy Orton's journey to becoming a wrestling icon is defined by a series of defining feuds and monumental victories. On April 18, 2004, at Backlash, Orton faced Mick Foley, a man who epitomized the brutal, hardcore style of wrestling. The emotional core of the match was Orton's legend killer persona colliding with the grizzled, respected veteran. The match was a brutal affair featuring a barbed wire baseball bat and the unforgettable moment when Orton, wearing only his trunks, was backdropped onto a pile of thumbtacks. The sight of the tacks embedded in his body was his first major bump. Orton ultimately won the match after an RKO onto the barbed wire bat, a victory that earned him the respect of the fans and established him as a future world champion. In 2005, Orton entered a career-defining feud with The Undertaker, a rivalry that spanned nearly the entire year and formally cemented his place among the main event elite. The feud was a narrative masterclass in elevating a new star. The initial clash was at WrestleMania 21, billed as Legend versus Legend Killer. Despite his father, Bob Orton Jr.'s interference, Orton lost the match, which surprisingly served to keep his character sympathetic and motivated. The storyline continued with a series of mind games, including a casket match at No Mercy, where the Ortons locked The Undertaker inside and set the casket on fire. The feud concluded at Armageddon in a brutal Hell in a Cell match where The Undertaker finally got his revenge. This year-long saga demonstrated the company's trust in Orton and solidified him as a top-tier performer. The rivalry between Randy Orton and John Cena, which peaked from 2007 to 2009, was a symbolic battle for the soul of the company. They both rose to the top at the same time, representing two different different sides of the same coin. Cena, the marketable, unwavering hero, and Orton, the cold, unfeeling villain. While some fans grew tired of their constant main event clashes, the feud was a necessary narrative cornerstone that defined an entire era. A key moment came at Breaking Point 2009 in a brutal I Quit match, where Cena ultimately handcuffed Orton and forced him to scream the words "I quit" to retain the WWE Championship. The legacy of their rivalry is not defined by its match quality, but by its sheer endurance and its role in anchoring WWE's programming for years. Orton's 2020 rivalry with Edge was a modern, self-aware classic. It was a story about two veterans who, after years apart, had to prove who was the better wrestler. The feud, which included a last man standing match at WrestleMania 36, culminated in a traditional singles match at Backlash 2020 that was famously billed as the greatest wrestling match ever. The title was a ridiculous, self-aware gimmick, but it created immense hype and forced both veterans to deliver something special in the challenging, empty arena environment of the 2020's pandemic. The match was a cinematic masterpiece, proving that even after decades, Orton and Edge could innovate and tell a compelling story about pride and legacy. Beyond his iconic feuds, Randy Orton's career is defined by his championship accolades. He is one of the most decorated superstars in WWE history. He's a 10-time WWE champion and a 4-time World Heavyweight champion. Orton has won the Royal Rumble twice and is recognized as both a Grand Slam and Triple Crown champion. He has also headlined WrestleMania twice. This quantifiable success reinforces the narrative of a living legend. It demonstrates his consistent position at the top of the card and proves that he is not simply a footnote in history, but one of its most dominant figures. After an 18-month absence, Randy Orton's triumphant return came at Survivor Series 2023, where he joined Cody Rhodes' team for the War Games match. However, this moment highlighted his newfound maturity and perspective. He was no longer the man who cared only about his own ego. He appreciated that the night was a collective moment for the fans, who got to see both him and CM Punk return. He acknowledged Punk as a hell of a worker and expressed genuine happiness for his return. His most recent major match was against his longtime rival, John Cena, at Backlash in May 2025, a match billed as One Last Time. The narrative of his career is now complete. The legend killer who tried to destroy the past has become a legend himself. The Orton-Cena match in his hometown was a symbolic closing of a pivotal chapter in wrestling history. The story of Randy Orton is not a simple tale of good and evil, but a complex narrative of growth and evolution. He arrived with the privilege of a legacy he sought to destroy, only to find himself becoming the very thing he once rebelled against. A living legend who endured, adapted, and survived the unforgiving nature of the business. His miraculous return from a career-ending injury was not just a comeback, it was a personal triumph that marked his final evolution from a ruthless predator to a respected mentor. His legacy will not be defined by the titles he won or the legends he killed, but by his unparalleled ability to adapt, endure, and ultimately become the undisputed embodiment of a generation of professional wrestling. What's your favorite Randy Orton moment? Let us know in the comments, hit like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to SlamTube Wrestling for more legendary stories from the Squared Circle.